How's it going, guys? Wanted to make a video explaining the paralysis ailment system and how to apply it and what it does and kind of how you should implement it or think about it in your hunts. I'm going to try and paralyze this Odogaron here. So the basics, you don't really need to know all the finite numbers or all the more specific details. Basically, every third hit of your weapon will apply paralysis. This is not paralysis right here. That's a shock trap. But basically, on average, every third hit from a paralysis weapon will apply the paralysis status effect to a monster. And you see right there, you can see that where my weapon hit, and he's paralyzed now. Like whenever my weapon flashes with a little burst of lightning, that's when the paralysis is actually being dealt to the monster. If you don't see that little burst of lightning, then it's just normal raw damage being dealt to the monster. And I should mention, I'm using a fully maxed out sword and shield paralysis weapon, and this is a low rank Odogaron. So it paralyzed him pretty quick, but you can expect it to take a little longer in high rank or with weapons that aren't completely maxed out and fully upgraded. So you can see how long he was paralyzed for. It was like a handful of seconds. It wasn't a whole lot of time. And when you think about how much damage poison does or blast, I mean, poison does roughly, probably 150 damage on average while you're doing more damage to the monster. So you need to think about what are you going to do when the monster is paralyzed. He's paralyzed again, so now his tail's already gone. You can use it, it's good for, breaking parts, it makes him stand still, but it's only for a handful of seconds. So it's fun to paralyze them and everything, but if all their parts are broken and you've already paralyzed him, I think I've already paralyzed this guy a few times, 2 or 3 times, and it has a diminishing return. He stays paralyzed less and less each time. So you got to kind of figure out what you're actually getting. Should I just be using poison, or should I keep using paralysis? And honestly, I think in solo hunts, I think it's better to maybe use poison, but those are the pros again, is they stay immobilized when they're paralyzed, and that can really help you get in there and sever that tail, or you could plant bombs and deal a few hundred damage as opposed to 150 that poison would deal. But I don't really consider bombs part of the paralysis effect, so I don't know if you can really count bombs in your justification of using paralysis. But I would say if you're playing online with a full group of 4 and they all see that monster get paralyzed, right here, you're gonna deal a lot of damage online as a team. So it's kind of a inverse relationship of poison and paralysis, where I feel poison is better if you're playing alone, and paralysis is better if you're playing online in a full party. Paralyzed again, so that's the 3rd time or something like that, and you see I'm trying to kind of wail on him, do damage here. Oh, now I got paralyzed. So it's worth mentioning that you can get paralyzed as well. Yeah, and so each monster, they start with a threshold that you have to deal a certain amount of paralysis, effect damage to them to meet that threshold and paralyze them for the first time. And then every time you paralyze the monster after that, that threshold grows, and it gets harder and harder to paralyze them. And I think I've only paralyzed this guy 3 times because, again, he is a low-rank monster and this is a high-rank weapon. And I think that's the only real... And he's weak to paralysis as well. I think that's the only real reason I've been able to paralyze him like 3 or 4 times. And here's like a 5th time or something like that. So I think that you can... You don't really... I don't really feel like you really need to know all the numbers and all the minutia. You can go into any hunt... like pretty much any, I feel like any rank of hunt with any weapon, any paralysis weapon, and you can pretty much like guarantee that you're going to be able to paralyze the monster once or twice at least. And I would just kind of go off of that as your rule of thumb. If you get more than 2, that's great, but I would just kind of factor that into your planning that I'm probably only going to paralyze this monster twice. How am I going to capitalize on the paralysis and make it worthwhile? And actually, I'm supposed to be capturing this guy, not killing him. But, I mean, that's the basics of paralysis. I kind of wanted to get that out there. You don't really, as a brand new hunter, you don't need to know all the numbers and tables and all that stuff. You can if you want, but I mean, it really boils down to you're going to be able to capture or paralyze a monster once or twice at least throughout the course of any hunt. And once it's paralyzed, you need to be thinking about, what am I going to do? Am I going to go for the tail? Am I going to plant bombs by its head and blow up those bombs? What is my overall strategy after I paralyze it? Because otherwise, it's the paralysis is just going to run its course, and the monster is going to be back in the hunt, and you're not going to be really utilizing it that much. And when you can just poison them and deal passive damage while you're dealing more damage, poison almost becomes a more attractive ailment to be using solo. So it's just something to think about, and I think that's a good way to think about it for new hunters. Got a couple plates here. So yeah, that's kind of my brief overview on paralysis and what I feel like you need to know as you go out on hunts, and I hope that helps, and I hope you keep it in mind, and thanks for watching.